First then, around 10 p.m. last night local time, Iran launched missiles towards Israel, the first such bombardment since the ceasefire came into place exactly 2 months ago. Iran saying Israel must stop its attacks on Lebanon, and if it were to respond, Israel would face more crushing and regretful blows. Donald Trump then said he would call the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to tell him not to retaliate, and we know that that call did take place. But then, overnight, Israel did hit back, striking what it called military targets in western and central Iran, with explosions heard in the capital, Tehran. And then after the break of dawn, once again, and for a third time in the last hour or so, Iran has fired missiles back into Israel in a new wave of attacks. Ellen Gainsford has the latest for us.
Sirens sounded across Jerusalem and Tel Aviv this Monday morning as multiple waves of Iranian missiles targeted Israel. These images show Israeli defenses shooting down some of the incoming projectiles. Iran's Revolutionary Guards claimed they were targeting military assets.
A short while ago, we subjected the strategic air bases Nevatim and Telnof to a missile barrage. This operation was in response to the Zionist regime's dawn aggression today against several Iranian radar sites.
Yemen's Houthi rebels also claimed a missile attack on Israel and declared a total ban on Israeli ships in the Red Sea. The tit-for-tat attacks came shortly after Israel bombed a range of targets in Iran. Iranian state media said explosions were heard in Isfahan, Karaj, Tabriz, and the capital, Tehran, while semi-official Iranian news agencies also reported a strike on a petrochemical plant in the city of Marshal. This exchange marks the most serious breach of the ceasefire since it was agreed on the 8th of April. The initial skirmish began when Iran opened fire on Israel in response to the Israeli military's continued bombing of the southern suburbs of Beirut over the weekend.
The Zionist regime has crossed all red lines and intensified its attacks in southern Lebanon, targeting the suburbs of Beirut. We had already warned that if attacks on the suburbs of Beirut continue, we would attack targets in the occupied territories.
Israel's strikes on Iran appear to be in defiance of Donald Trump's wishes. On Sunday evening, the U.S. president called on Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu not to react to Iranian missiles. Tehran has said that an end to Israeli attacks, including on Lebanon, would be a precondition to any peace agreement.
Well, Doug Herbert, our international affairs commentator, is with me here on set. Doug, we heard in Ellen's report there, Donald Trump saying he was going to talk to Benjamin Netanyahu to tell him to calm. Didn't seem to happen, did it? I mean, is Donald Trump still calling the shots here?
Not judging from the facts on the ground, or at least not to the extent that his narrative, his self-narrative would suggest. Look, you have this sort of self-created nightmare taking shape here if you're Donald Trump, because Trump has repeatedly invade upon not just Benjamin Netanyahu, but Iran, to basically sending the message, okay, you've fired your little rounds at each other. Enough. Stand back, stand down. Let us finish off. Let me get to this peace deal. You're preventing me from getting there. And neither of them have really paid any heed, or if they have, it's not apparent from the latest exchanges here. When Donald Trump says he calls the shots, I think there's an element of wishful thinking in it, to the extent that Benjamin Netanyahu has been under a lot of pressure at home, not just from his political allies in Israel's most far-right, ultra-conservative government in its modern history, to take the fight to Iran and not let up. In fact, his hardline national security minister said over the weekend that, Tehran will be burning, next, and basically saying keep going at it. He's caught between the pressure from those political allies, but not just, also Israel's opposition, also putting Netanyahu under strain to take the fight to Iran. So it's across the political spectrum, really, and a Donald Trump who has been his staunch ally in the past, right? They've had all their meetings together. And there's a sense with Netanyahu that at the end of the day, if he has to choose between one, he's going to choose his own political imperatives, which right now are the domestic ones, the pressure at home, perhaps calculating that at the end of the day, he can bring Trump around. He knows how to pull the right levers with strings with Trump to make him see the light from Israel's perspective. And he's not entirely wrong, because what has Trump actually said with respect to Israel? He has not opposed Israel fighting back and firing off missiles. What he has basically says he will approve of surgical strikes by Israel against Hezbollah militants in Lebanon. We're talking about Lebanon now. And he says, but he would not support an all-out full Israeli assault on Lebanon, which presumably means sending the troops in and taking over the entire country. By the way, as has been sort of incrementally happening in recent days with, the assault on Lebanon by Israeli troops and the expansion creeping northwards. So he's literally caught in a scenario right now where it's not easy to extricate himself because he himself has given Netanyahu a lot of wriggle room, a lot of margin for maneuver and a margin for interpretation. All Netanyahu has to do is invoke that threat as he sees it, an existential threat from a terror regime. And that's it. And Iran, for its part, is tying together the two fronts, Israel's front against Hezbollah in Lebanon and the U.S. Strikes and Israeli strikes against Iran. The two cannot be dissociated for Iran. If you want a ceasefire deal, it's been telling Trump, you have to work on both fronts, and they both have to stop fighting.
Doug, while you're talking there, we're getting a bit of reaction from Iran. In fact, this is from the Iranian Foreign Ministry, saying that the US is responsible for the consequences of any escalation caused by Israel. I mean, are we on the brink of a slide back into war here, do you think?
I mean, you don't really have to use the word brink. We are sliding back. The question is whether should I use the euphemism, whether these skirmishes, the exchange of hostilities, is going to rise to the intense level of all-out firefight and war that we saw in the early days of the war, a war that spilled well over across the region, across the Gulf allies, putting them very much on edge, and they're still on edge today, right? Saudi Arabia and Qatar have all but implored Trump to end this war because it has shattered their image as oases of peace and prosperity and tourist hubs and havens in the Middle East region, in an otherwise volatile Middle East region. They've wanted him to end this war. It's not happening right now. So even just sitting here today and talking about the resumption for the first time since this fragile ceasefire took effect 2 months ago, the resumption of these direct exchanges between Israel and between Iran, that is enough to put everyone in the region on edge. It takes on a dynamic of its own. The question now, the $64 trillion question, I'm unable to answer it. Maybe we will in the next few days when more reporting is done, is how much coordination has there been between Washington and Israel on these latest escalations? Was there any coordination? Did Netanyahu have a green light or go-ahead from Trump? I presume that probably not, given that Trump said, "I call the shots," and he didn't want Israel or Iran to retaliate again, and yet it's happening. So right now, Trump is back essentially where he started. Even if the war isn't at its original intensity, he faces the same questions right now. How does he get the Strait of Hormuz open? How does he stop the fighting between Israel and Lebanon, which is hard conditioned by Iran as a criteria for ending that broader war, the U.S.-Iran war? So there's no easy answer. And the fact we're still asking those extremely tough questions and we don't have easy answers 100 days on from the beginning of this war, that speaks volumes.
One other reaction coming in from Iran just a few seconds ago, Iran saying that the latest will affect the talks as well, which, of course, Donald Trump has been saying for weeks now that a deal is about to be signed.
But he's backed off a little bit, Stuart.
What if it never happens?
Yeah. Donald Trump's bullishness on this deal, this blowing hot and cold, but more often than not signaling a deal's imminent, sort of trying to will the deal into being a deal that never really was imminent, because the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, is right now apparently the ones in Iran really calling the shots for this regime and the new Ayatollah. Because of that, no, I mean, we're far from a ceasefire deal. We're far from anything that would even set the conditions for a ceasefire deal. And on the contrary, we have right now Saudi Arabia this morning and Qatar in sort of a very defensive posture. Kuwait's international airport was also hit on Saturday, or reportedly targeted on Saturday. And this is all causing a lot of alarm across the region. Donald Trump right now, he's not exactly holding the cards, to appropriate one of his own terms. And he's probably scrambling. He and his advisors are figuring out ways to get the cards back if they ever had them in the first place.